I would really appreciate it if you two didn't, beat each other up in the background. That would be great. Hi kids, welcome back to another pizza party. I'm Mrs. Pizza. Winnie and Cheese are fighting to the death in the background, which is fun for us. And we are here today to do a quick little recommendation video because this time of year I am obsessed with finding witchy rom-coms, witchy romance books. Anything witchy, honestly, but if it's witchy and romance, I'm in. And I have been searching for my perfect witchy romance. Spoiler, I haven't found it yet, but I've definitely found some good reads, and I thought I'd share some that I really like with you because I have read so many. Here's a few of my top little ones that I've really enjoyed, and if you're looking for something witchy romance this spooky season, the amount of noise that you two are making is amazing, honestly. It's really impressive. We are going to start off with recommendations of books that I have read and really enjoyed, and hopefully put something on your radar or you hear something that you are interested in. The first one we're going to talk about is the one with the sweetest and coziest vibe of all of them, and that is The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, and this is by Sangu Mandanna. This is one of those books that gets talked about with cozy fantasy a lot, and I think it definitely should be clumped in with cozy books. This is the story of Mika Moon, and she's a witch. Witches exist, but in secret. You're not allowed to tell people you're a witch in this world. You're also not allowed to hang out with other witches. If too many witches get in a spot together, the magic gets too big and bad things can happen, so witches live very solitary existences. But Mika has actually kind of done this really ingenious thing where she has started a YouTube channel where she pretends to be a witch even though she really is a witch. So she's hiding in plain sight, kind of doing the fake magical stuff, but it's actually real magic. And through this YouTube channel, she is contacted by a group of people that all live in this very remote area, and they have 3 young witches that need help. They're all orphans because that's another thing that happens in this world. If you are a witch, you become an orphan at some point when you're very, very young. So she has these 3 young witch orphans that are living kind of with this found family in this big house, in this very cozy setting, and Mika is invited to come help teach these young witches how to be witches. This story is incredibly sweet. The found family is incredibly adorable. You will love all of the characters involved because they all just care for these 3 young girls so much. And also there just kind of happens to be like a grumpy librarian named Jamie who lives there, so maybe romance. This is a really sweet story. The next book in this series by this author has been announced and I think actually has a release date, which is April of 2024 tentatively. Right now it's April of 2024, but that one is A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping. I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe the main character in that book is introduced in the first book, but like most romance series, I think you can read each one individually. But the first book is so sweet, you might as well pick it up. If you like cozy, found family, sweet, witchy rom-com, I would definitely say pick this one up. I also honestly recommend this one to a lot of people that aren't into like super heavy romance. This is a good gateway book. The steam is there, but it's not over the top. It's very minimal. This is a good book to recommend to the masses if they're interested in something kind of cozy, fall time witchy with romance. The next book we're going to talk about is one that I feel like I recommend all the time, and that is Wolf Gone Wild by Juliette Cross. This is the first book in a series. It is the Stay a Spell series, I believe, but here's my disclaimer for that. I really like Wolf Gone Wild. The other books in the series are fine. They're not bad, they don't hit as good as the first one does. If you get really invested in this world, by all means, continue. I have other books within the series that I enjoyed, but the first book, let me tell you what it's about. So Wolf Gone Wild is the story of Mateo, and he is a werewolf. And Mateo is, he believes, cursed. See, what's happening is Mateo has obviously his normal Mateo personality, but he also has another personality that takes over when he is in his werewolf form that is called Alpha. And these 2 personalities are usually kept separate. Well, Alpha has now snuck into Mateo's Winnie just bumped the camera, sorry. Thank you for your cinematography skills. Mateo now has the consciousness of his other personality, which is Alpha, living inside of his brain, kind of talking to him and giving commentary all the time. And it's driving Mateo crazy. Like, he is kind of stuck in this limbo in between where Alpha can talk to him. And he doesn't want Alpha sitting on his brain anymore. He wants his two very distinct personalities back. He wants to be Mateo, and then he wants to shift and be Alpha. He believes he's cursed, and he's going crazy. So he seeks out the help of Evie, who is one of the Savoy sisters, and the entire series follows the Savoy sisters. But Evie is a hexbreaker. That is her magical power. That is what she excels at. And so Mateo goes to her and says, "Help, I am cursed. You must help me." And Evie's like, "Yeah, sure. You're also kind of cute." Romance ensues. These two are adorable. The romance is really sweet, but Alpha pops in and has very alpha thoughts, which also is interesting during spicy times. This has spice. I like the setting. It's all happening in New Orleans. This is super fun, and I really, really enjoyed it. I was slightly disappointed by the rest of the series, but I think that's just because the first book hits so good. The next book we're going to talk about is actually a novella, and this is in the new Protectorate series, which if you love kind of fantasy paranormal series that take place in a fantasy world that just happens to be exactly the same as ours, just with magic, I've read a few of these now and I've enjoyed everything in the Protectorate series, but the book we are going to talk about, because it has a witch, is Empire. This is the story of Zia, and she is a garden witch, and she works at a giant, massive estate. She has been tasked. I don't know why I couldn't say that word. That was fun. That was fun for me. Zia has been tasked with taking care of this very expensive and important rose garden on the estate. It has a lot of roses that have been cultivated in this garden that may or may not exist in other places. The roses are important, and Zia loves being a garden witch. We open this book with Zia in her car racing back to the estate. She's worked there for a year, and the number one rule is don't be on the estate grounds after dark. But there's a frost coming, and Zia is about to lose a year's worth of work if these roses get cold. They will die. Everybody knows when you garden that sometimes a frost happens out of nowhere and it can completely decimate your garden. So Zia is rushing. Please don't move the camera. Zia is rushing back to the estate, and she's like, well, I might lose my job, but I'm definitely not losing these roses. So Zia gets there in the nick of time, but then it's dark, and Zia can't seem to find her way off of the estate. She is hunkered down and hiding because she doesn't want to get in trouble. Now, the reason that you're not supposed to be on this estate after dark is because the owner of the estate is a vampire, and his name is Harlan. Here's the fun part. This it's a novella, so it's short. It is an insta-love situation, but not really, because Zia has been dreaming about, she's never met him, but she's been dreaming about what Harlan would be like, what it would be like to meet him, talk to him, what he's like as a person. And Harlan has been doing the same thing about Zia, watching her from afar, taking steps to protect her, kind of having an unrequited crush, even though it's not unrequited. Neither one of them knows that the other one is dreaming about each other. This was super sweet. I really enjoyed it, and I really had a good time with all of the novellas that I've read in this series. So if you're interested in a garden witch and a very old retired warrior vampire who's now, a billionaire living in a mansion, the next two books we're going to talk about are actually in a series I recently finished, Back in a Spell by Lana Harper. I believe what book are you? Do you say on here what book you are? Might be 4, might be 5. There's a bunch of books in this series. The first book being Payback's a Witch, which introduces you to this world of Thistle Grove. Thistle Grove is a town where there are 4 magical witch families that kind of rule the town, and every allotted period of time there is a tournament to determine which family will be the one in charge of all of the magic. So these 4 families vie in this competition to control the town. There's also humans living in this town, but they don't know that the witch stuff is happening. There's just people hanging out, but the town itself is a tourist destination for witchy stuff. Think like Salem, Massachusetts, where people go there because they like to get that witchy fall thing going on. But in this town, Thistle Grove, the witch stuff is actually real. The humans just don't know about it. The second book in that series, which I have read, is From Bad to Cursed, which I enjoyed just fine. Here's how I'll put this. I really enjoy the entire world of Thistle Grove more than I've actually enjoyed each individual book, but I keep coming back for more because I really really like the world that's been created. See, each family has its own power or affinity and also has its own vibe. In From Bad to Cursed, one of the families is the more gothy necromancy witch, and one of the families is the more garden earth magic witch. But I like that book because they flipped the more traditional roles, where our gothy necromancy witch is the female main character, and our Winnie, I swear, Winnie just keeps changing the angle of the camera. Don't grumble at me. You're the one that's causing issues. And the male main character is our garden kind of earthy witch in that one. It was fine. It was an enemies to lovers, although I didn't really feel it was more of a like misunderstanding a while ago, and so we kind of have prickly feelings towards each other to lovers situation. This one, Back in a Spell, our female main character is the sister of I'm going to call him the villain of the first book. She comes from the more wealthy, snobby family where they have what they describe as like an elemental type magic. And her name is Nina. And Nina is seen as an ice queen. She is a lawyer for her family, has a very important job. She's everything's white, minimalist, stark lines, cashmere, just exactly what you think she would be. And she's recently gone through a pretty rough breakup. Her fiance left her right before the wedding, and she's kind of torn up about it. So Nina's best friend says, hey, you need to get back out there, girl. You can't just keep wallowing in this self-pity cycle that you've got going on. Yes, your breakup was hard, but you need to move on. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull up this dating app, and we're going to swipe yes on someone that you would never ever go on a date with. So there's no pressure. So you just go out, have a good time, and you don't have to worry about making a relationship work with some new person. You just get back out there, get back on the horse. And if it goes horrible, I'll make you some hors d'oeuvres. How about that? If it goes terrible, you at least have snacks in the end. So Nina ends up going on a date with Morty. Morty is non-binary, but the pronouns that they use are they, him. A lot of the times in this, they use the male pronouns for him. So I'm going to use the male pronouns. He is a character that is introduced earlier in another book as a friend character. Morty is a human. They have no magic. So Morty and Nina go on this date and instantly recognize each other, and the date goes horribly because they have a history where Nina's family was trying to buy Morty's family's bar. So it goes horribly, but the next morning, Nina wakes up and her magic has gone bananas. She has gone from being a powerful witch to the most powerful witch, and Morty, who's a human and never had magic before, now has magic. So these two have to team up. Even though they had a horrible date, they now have to work together to figure out what's going on. And romance happens. This was sweet. I enjoyed it. A lot of the time I will say with these books, even though they're marketed as rom-coms, there's funny moments in this, but this is much more like just regular romance. It's more about the drama. It's about the character arcs. It's about the town. It's not as lighthearted as a normal rom-com would be, but they're dealing with some tougher stuff, but it never feels too deep or too dark. It's definitely not a dark romance. The next book that I have already picked up and worked quite a bit of my way into is In Charm's Way. This is the most recent book in this world. Jesus, digging an imaginary hole right here. Just right there. Just going for it. Go, girl, go. Go, girl, go. Yes, what a great knot hole we just dug. This is following a character, Delilah, who is actually introduced in the previous book. Well, I think she's actually introduced in the first, if I remember correctly. But Delilah is a lot of fun. She's very grumpy, and she works at the bookstore that her family is in charge of. Her family's magic has to do with record keeping, which sounds really boring. They're in charge of knowledge acquirement and keeping. They keep libraries, they acquire knowledge and magic. They're the record keeping group, which sounds boring, but actually sounds pretty cool at the same time. Delilah, in the previous book, has an incident happen that wipes her memory. She is accidentally obliviated. And so in this book, we are picking up 6 months later with the repercussions of Delilah going from being an iron trap of a mind to now having problems remembering some of the most simplest things. Things just slip right out of her brain. Well, Delilah is so fed up with this whole situation. She can't take it anymore. They've tried everything, and so she does something that she probably shouldn't do and works a very dangerous spell to give herself back her mind, her ability to remember things. And in so set off a chain of events. We have in this book also met a character who shows up one day at Delilah's store. They have a very instant attraction to each other. As far as I've gotten in the book, we haven't seen her again. Her name is Katrina, but she says call her Cat. And it says on the back of the book that she is a hunter of monsters. We haven't learned that in the book yet, but it's in the synopsis, so I feel like I'm allowed to say it. So we are going to have Cat and Delilah's romance happen in this one. If you like your your witchy romances happening in a small town, but having all kinds of magic instead of, I feel like most tend to go with earth magic, where we have, spell magic, we have necromancy magic, we have earth magic, but we also have more elemental magic in this world. The witches have all kinds of magic. These books all have different representation in them as well. We have male-female couples, we have male-male couples, we have non-binary, we have all kinds of things. So each book has a different relationship if you're into it. This one is going to be sapphic because Delilah is definitely into girls. The next book we're going to talk about is A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon, and this is by Sarah Hawley. I will say, I actually ended up DNFing this book, but before you come for me, I was in a terrible mood and it wasn't the book's fault. I just wasn't feeling it. But I have had so many friends on Goodreads really enjoy this, and so I want to put it out there because you might enjoy it too, just because I was having a bad day, you know? There was parts about it I really did like. This is the story of Muriel. She is a witch in a small town. If you like that small town vibe, this one is definitely a small town, but in this small town, all sorts of magical nonsense exists. And Muriel is a witch from a very powerful witch family, but her affinity is something that her family doesn't see as important. See, Muriel is an earth witch, and earth witches are seen as kind of trivial and, not as cool as some of the magic that the other members of her family have. Muriel is kind of a disappointment to her mother, and she is feeling the pressure of that. So one day, while she's practicing a conjuring spell, she is trying to conjure, I forget what she's even trying to conjure, but it's not what she conjures. She accidentally conjures a demon. And when she conjures this demon, she accidentally conjures him for a bargain. And so he's stuck with her until a bargain is struck, but she doesn't want to strike a bargain with a demon. So these two are kind of stuck in this forced proximity situation because he can't go anywhere until a bargain is struck, and she's not going to strike a bargain. They're just in limbo. The demon that she summons is Ozroth, otherwise known as Oz, and to pass him off, because she doesn't want to admit to everybody that once again a spell has gone horribly wrong, she tells everybody that they're dating. That's her new boyfriend. That's why he's around all the time, not because he's a demon. He's her boyfriend, right? So these two are in a fake dating, forced proximity situation in this small town. This one was fun because of the small town setting, all the different characters. I think if any of that sounds fun, it's definitely worth picking up. And the last book we're going to talk about is also about dating a demon. Witches and demons, I guess it's just a good pairing. This is, I would say, the steamiest, the spiciest of all the books, and that is Charming Your Dad by Sarah Blue. This is the first book in a series. In this book, we have Blair. She is a witch, and she is dating this absolutely awful guy. I can't even remember his name, but I know I want to call him like Kyle. I don't think that was his name. He's real Kyle, He ends up cheating on her. She catches him. He's awful. Well, around the same time as Blair has caught her awful boyfriend cheating on her, his estranged father rolls into town, and he is super hot. And so to get back at her cheating ex, she decides to put the moves on his dad. Well, the thing about his dad is that his dad, whose name is Dax, just happens to be a demon. Yeah. He's a demon. He's a motorcycle riding, glasses wearing. Like he has glasses, but he also has a motorcycle. Like you love Dax, He is trying to reconnect with his adult son, but I don't think he realized how much of a garbage person his son was. Blair goes into this trying to get back at her ex with Dax, and then realizes there's a little bit something more there pretty quickly. There's a lot of demons and witches and stuff going on like that in this story, and I really enjoyed it. There has since been, I think, 2 more books that have come out. Each of the books is obviously following characters from the first book, but I wouldn't look at the synopsis of those books until you've read this one, because I think it'll be a little bit of a spoiler for characters if you look at who those books are about. But those are all the books that I have actually read and enjoyed or would recommend for people looking for witchy romances. The next 2 are books that are on my radar that I am really excited about picking up, and because I'm thinking about picking them up, I just thought I'd tell you about them too. The first one is The Witchwood Knot, and that is by Olivia Atwater. Olivia Atwater wrote, if I can get it out of here, it's like tucked in the absolute worst spot. Olivia Atwater wrote Half a Soul. This is actually a really fun time. This is kind of like if Bridgerton met the Fae. It's a fun time if you're kind of into historical and fantasy at the same time, but this also isn't like the super highest of stakes. I wouldn't call it cozy, but it's not the end of the world coming or anything like that. I will say this one has 0 spice in it. I think they might kiss, but this is a romance. It's just not a spicy one. The Witchwood Knot is the newest book by this author that's coming out, and I'm also assuming that this one is a romance without spicy times either. That being said, I still had a really good time with this, even though there wasn't any spice. I think that's also because there wasn't any closed door spice in either. I don't like when they tell me how hot something is and then they close the door in my face. This one, it's just it never got to the spicy bits on page. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. I'm okay with a romance not having spice if they don't tease me with spice. This one, The Witchwood Knot, I know is about a witch. I believe she moves into a house, and it sounds like there's familiars and other paranormal things going on. I'm assuming this one is going to be low on the steam as well, but it is a romance. The cover is lovely. Absolutely adore it. And this one comes out on November 28th. And the other one that is on my radar is currently available, and that one is What the Hex by Jessica Clare. And this is supposed to be a Grumpy Sunshine book, but here is my asterisk to this one. I read the first book in this series because this is the second book of the series. The first book is Go Hex Yourself, and I did not enjoy that one. It is very poorly disguised Raylo fanfic, and let's all be honest, Raylo fans are having a moment right now. Good for them. They're getting what they want. But I felt like I didn't like it. There's a lot of things I could complain about it, but I just didn't like it. It just didn't do anything for me. And so I had written this whole series off. And then a bunch of my friends on Goodreads who had lukewarm feelings about the first book picked up the second book and liked it so much more, to the point where people were putting on the reviews, I didn't like the first one, I loved the second one. So maybe this was just that story. The first book didn't really resonate with people like this one is, because I don't think this is any kind of fanfic reimagining. I mean, maybe it is, but maybe it's a better story. This is the story of a friend of the character from the first book. Well, I think both main characters are friends of characters in the first book. But in this world, a familiar isn't an animal, it's a person. It's kind of like a magical assistant. And a lot of the times you have to interview for these positions. Witches live very long times, and so they have multiple familiars, but then a familiar can go on to becoming their own witch. It's kind of like an assistant, and then they move on to later taking their own assistants, getting a promotion to being a witch. And this one, we have a young woman who wants nothing more than to be a familiar. She wants to do with magic, but she has just had all the trouble in the world getting a familiar position. And our male main character, I believe, had some sort of accident, something bad happened, and his familiar was taken away from him, and he lost the privilege of having a familiar. And so now he is taken on our female main character as his familiar, because she's desperate to be a familiar and he's desperate to have one. I had a lot of people say that this was a lot of fun Grumpy Sunshine, because again, Grumpy Sunshine are buzzwords, and so a lot of the time things that are marketed as Grumpy Sunshine are not actually Grumpy Sunshine, and this one supposedly is. But those two are the two that I think I will be picking up after I finish the witchy rom-com I'm reading right now. But that, kids, is where we're gonna end this pizza party. I hope you heard of some witchy romance books that sound interesting, that you want to pick up. I hope I hurt your TBR a little. I'm just trying to ruin everyone's TBR as much as mine is ruined, because let's be honest, I'm never gonna get through that TBR. Are you gonna get through yours? Well, I hopefully gave you some more problems for it, I hope you're reading good books out there, wherever you are. If you had fun hanging out with me and the dogs, please subscribe, and I'll see you next time.